welcome everybody to the LSA, to term 2, Thursday talks. Very nice to have you back. I hope everyone's had a very happy holiday and new year, and now enjoying the briskness of January. We are all too. What better place to be inside, online, and today listening to the great Peter Sofoluke from BPTW, a senior associate. So really excited to hear from you, Peter. Peter is an amazing supporter of the LSA, has been incredible, giving his time in reviews for students and a number of other conversations around architectural education more generally. But today, Peter is going to talk quite specifically through the lens of the Southgate Office Village project by BPTW, outlining the complexities of consultation and stakeholder requirements. Fantastic subject, one I know that many of our students are wrestling with, partly how do we even start to open up a conversation, let alone consult. So really looking forward to hearing all about how the project has come about. Despite the scheme's extensive public engagement, it met fierce opposition and an initial refusal from the planning committee. Peter will discuss both the merits and challenges of the planning process, where political pressures can have a direct influence on the outcome. Peter's personal experience is across various sectors and stages of architecture, but specialises in residential architecture, often working closely with existing communities. He's also part of the studio's EDI steering group and a Part 3 examiner at the RIBA Academy and the University of Westminster. So without further ado, and with wanting to make the most of our hour, I'd love to hand over to Peter. Just remind everybody that please put your questions in the chat. You're very welcome to ask questions. We will try to leave about 15-20 minutes towards the end of the hour to take those questions. And without further ado, over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the kind words. Samantha, as mentioned, my name's Peter Sofoluke. I'm a senior associate at the practice, and yeah, just want to talk to you about the Southgate Office Village scheme. So just to begin, a little bit about the practice. BPTW, where I'm at, we specialise in architecture, urban design, BIM, and previously planning. And the practice is 35 years old, employs staff about 120 people. We've got two London School of Architecture graduates that joined us last year. And yeah, we're quite keen supporters of the school. I think the school's principles largely outline with ours. And yeah, just as I mentioned, we specialise in residential schemes of all scales, working with client bases which range from developers to local authorities. So without further ado, I'll move on to Southgate Office Village, which is Southgate, if you don't know, is in North London on the edge of the city, and it's Southgate Office Village is this site here, which bounds the Southgate Conservation area, which is centred around Southgate Station. It was designed by Charles Holden, who has designed a number of tube stations along the network, and that station pretty much sets the conservation area. So the site as it is now is made up of 1960s office blocks with a kind of a raised car park along this edge here. Chase Road, which leads towards the station, is a very steep road. There's a 2.5 metre level change, across the site from east to west, but north to south, where we're looking at a much significant level change. And then it's bound to east here by the railway line. So just for context, the bottom of the screen here is north, and south is up here. So again, just picking up on the his historical aspect of the area. You've got the listed station here by Charles Holden, with pylons flanking the station, and a parade of commercial units that completes this setting. Looking at his historical maps, the urban grain of Southgate Office Village hadn't changed materially, but the site has always been set outside of the conservation area. Now, London is a area under intense pressure to increase housing, and it's been deemed in mayoral policy, so from the Greater London Authority, that there is a need to look at pockets of land, brownfield sites within closer proximity to transport nodes, such as Southgate Station, which has quick links into central London, and this site was identified as a site that could contain a huge capacity towards delivering those homes. Looking at the area in a bit more detailed land use, so around the station, it's predominantly retail and commercial, and then as you move further away from the station, you have residential homes, and then the scale, as you can see, does begin to lower. You have 4 or 5, 6-story buildings, radically located quite close to the centre, but then as you move away, that begins to reduce down to 2 stories. So a key challenge for us was the interface with these two-story homes north of the site. Now, looking at the site, there was currently no east to west connectivity across the site. So these diagrams, this is Chase Road here, with the station up here, the railway line flanks here. So we felt that this east to west connection was a really important initial consideration, which then determined these two urban forms. Given the sensitivity to the north of the site, this block here was carefully sculpted to push and pull, reduce the mass to minimise impact on the homes to the north. And then the block to the south, we felt to break this up to allow light in to this central space, and not, and then again just to soften the impact. In terms of height, we were supported by both the local council, which was Enfield Council, and the Greater London Authority, to really push the density and height they felt was supported in this location. So we've concentrated height closest to the railway, then stepping down towards Chase Road. And then being a building with such a prominence, we've sculpted the form, looking at a wide range of views across Southgate, to ensure that from these key views the building was sculpted, and that its impact on the townscape was as well considered. Finally, there was a series of landscape spaces, whether that would be hard or soft landscape. So a resident podium sat, which linked the taller elements, with then a hard landscape promenade, which created this new east to west link through the site. As I mentioned, that is a link that's not possible. So the initial design and development for the scheme took an art deco approach, and this was something that had been discussed with the local planners. They felt a contextual reflection was appropriate, and now that led to a horizontal articulation. As this scheme developed, it was red brick, and that then translated to an initial proposal that went to pre-app as such. Now, this scheme didn't really receive the support from the planners, and at BPTW we had an internal design review to reflect on the positives and negatives of the scheme, and it was decided that internally it would move teams, and that's when it moved over to my team and the partner Chris Bath to take a fresh look at it. And so the big feedback from the planners at this stage, and it did go to public consultation, was that the scheme felt quite bulky, although those initial concept diagrams were supported. The execution felt too incongruous with the site. So we looked at it to make these towers a lot more slender. That was a very important move. So that the outline that's shaded in yellow, that's the original scheme. The black outline here shows how we've adapted that passing. So we reduced the height of the tallest tower from 22 story down to 18, and then gave a bit more mass to the element that fronted onto Chase Road. And another key move was just to look at the form to unify, particularly these the taller two towers to be exactly the same footprint in form. Now, given that the Art Deco influence, which is a very prominent around central Southgate, was very well supported. We looked around site to see how those buildings had been reflected, and actually, when you look at it, the vertical emphasis is very prominent. We then looked at materials like glazed brick tiles, and there were also a number of dark brick materials. So we took that and then came up with a two-tone approach for the towers. These two tones helped to reduce the visual appearance, so that it's not just seen as one mass. Even though a tower was one form, that would then be viewed as two slender elements. And then we picked up this fluted stonework, which we then integrated into the design to again just express the verticality of the scheme. That was another change from the previous scheme, which had a horizontal out reference. So here's a view of the scheme, and I think you can see that it does appear a lot more slender. I think that the two-tone of brickwork really helped to achieve that. And then just looking at the plans, so at ground floor level, it's predominantly occupied by commercial spaces. The commercial spaces that were on site, it was felt that Southgate still needed that, and the lower levels helped to really activate this central promenade here with a number of commercial spaces fronting onto that space. And then we were very careful to ensure that the residential entrance lobbies were situated facing onto this central promenade, so that there's as much active frontage from east to west as possible. Now onto Chase Road, the main road here. He then had a cafe and a office hub, which again just really activates this corner of the site. And this is a view of that central promenade, looking east to west towards Chase Road, and you can see that these are the towers. This is the short linear block with a series of office spaces fronting out on to this central promenade. Is it a typical floor, or as you move up the building? So at first floor level, there's a series of pocket podium spaces, which are then shared between the towers. And then moving up, those towers split, and you can see that the form of these two towers have been carefully sculpted with a lot of setbacks, pushing and pull in to consider all of the views around Southgate that you will always get from various views. You will always see the gaps between the towers. And this is a view looking from north to south down Chase Road. You can see the quite significant level change across the site. And then from Southgate Station, again, a lighter tone of brickwork to help you to just articulate these buildings to merge into the townscape. Now, overall, the scheme provided 216 homes, of which over 30% was affordable. The GLA policy was 35%, so slightly below that. 10% wheelchair homes in line with policy, but as a significant proportion of commercial and new office space. There was also a new pocket park which created the east to west link, a new pedestrian route and cycle route, again in enhancing the connectivity across Southgate. The scheme is located a 5-minute walk to Southgate Tube. It was deemed to be a landmark building for Southgate, and there was also a large community in infrastructure every summer. Now, to get to that point, there was a very intensive consultation process. Now, consultation involves consultation with the local members of the community, but other stakeholders. So, Enfield Council. We also engaged his historic England because of the conservation aspect of this setting. We engage with local conservation groups and design review panels. From that first pre-app meeting in March 2017, we submitted the scheme in May 2019, and from this timeline you can see after that submission date, the consultation period continued. We did change the scheme after it had been submitted for planning. So that was to up the affordable housing homes. Looking at planning, it is always about weighing up what's a priority, and during the post-submission consultation period, it was deemed that the level of affordable housing was more important than the quantity of commercial space provided. So we did lose a floor of commercial space to then provide more homes and more affordable housing. So as a summary, the consultation process involved 12 pre-app meetings with the local authority, two presentations to the GLA, 2 place and design review panel presentations, 4 councillor and committee briefings, and then meetings with the local conservation area group, Historic England, a public consultation event, a planning panel meeting, which is something new. We chose to meet with the local residents post the submission to again gauge their concerns, work with them, and then those comments contributed towards the post submission amendments. Other stakeholder engagement, as you can see, a lot of support was received from highways, Thames Water, the fire brigade, a design review panel, the police, and the Greater London Authority. Now, when the scheme went to planning committee, the planning officers recommended the scheme for approval. I think the 2.5-year consultation period was that long because we intentionally wanted to reach a position where the planners were supporting it go into committee, and that's where we stood. At this point in time, the local community had come together. They'd formed a group against this scheme, and the main concern was the height. But the local plan for Enfield had identified this site as a site for transformative and significant change. So policy had effectively given our team the confidence that this site could and should accommodate a scheme that will effectively transform the area. Now, the planning committee was a very intense, very long process, and the committee is made up of elected members, and I think it is fair to say that will form part of their decision making. They are there to represent their constituents, and the scheme was unanimously refused by all councillors on the night, despite a recommendation for approval. So height was a material concern. They were also concerned about the level of traffic that such a large scheme could generate. Now, the scheme was designed to be predominantly car-free, apart from some wheelchair resident homes, and that was intentional policy because it is so close to Southgate Station. And another concern was the pressure that such a large development would have on the local amenities such as schools, GPs, etc. And a local group, Southgate Civic Voice, that they felt that their voice had not been heard at the public consultation, and I'll come on to next steps they took, particularly during the appeal. So the reasons for refusal were height, bulk, massing, affordable housing being below 35%, although it was 31%, and if schemes don't meet that policy, they then have to go undergo a viability assessment where it is assessed against what is actually affordable, and the local authority were satisfied that 31% was effectively the best affordable offer that this scheme could put forward. Also, the setting and heritage was a reason for refusal, and residential amenity. So it's no surprise that, given the planning officers had supported the scheme, but the committee members had refused it, the client chose to take this to appeal, and they felt consulting with the QC that there was a strong case for the appeal. Now, the way appeals work is it's very similar to court. There's an inspector that represents the Secretary of State, and then you have two sides. You have the appellant, and then those against. The team against was made up of the local council, and then Southgate District Civic Voice, who applied for Rule 6 party status. Now, Rule 6 party effectively means that local residents can apply to be on an equal level as both the Viewpoint and Enfield Council, which meant that all of the documents that both parties prepared for the appeal had to be shared with Southgate Civic Voice, and Southgate Civic Voice had the right to examine witnesses on both sides. Now, as Enfield had recommended it for approval, it was then very difficult to call their planning officers as witnesses against the scheme. So the council had appointed expert witnesses to represent the committee members in the areas of planning, urban design, and heritage, but none of these people were actually involved on behalf of the council during the planning process. Whereas all of these consultants and parties here, we were all actively involved in the project. Now, the appeal process, as I said, it's very similar to a court situation where you have a legal counsel on both sides. They call witnesses, and they are examined. But from the point of an architect, the main contribution that we gave to this process was to provide what is called a proof of evidence, and that's a document that takes the reasons for refusal and it challenges that and just explains why we disagree with those reasons. So over the course of March 2021 was all about preparing for the appeal hearing, which happened in September 21 over 8 days. I attended that, and listening to the witnesses on both sides, it was very much one-sided, and it's no surprise that when the final decision notice came through, the refusal had been overturned. I'll just skip this page because I've explained that previously. So looking at the reasons for approval from the planning inspectorate, he felt that the scheme, although it was tall, that is not necessarily a reason for refusal, and the key reason for that was a diagram and a specific part of the planning local part of that plan that had identified the Southgate Office Village as a site for transformative change. He felt the layout that he had designed was logical, and he thought that the approach to arranging the site under such constraint was logical, and it does beg the question that how do we speak to the planning process, or what could be changed with this planning process to potentially avoid the need to go to appeal. Once it goes to appeal, the viewpoint could have claims for costs in which the council would have to pay out for all of the compliance costs. In this case, they chose not to go for costs. They just wanted the consent, but that would have come out of public money, which could go towards providing schools, homes, amenities within the local area. And I think that is in terms of the whole engagement process that spanned over 3 years, to ensure we had consulted all of those stakeholders. You would have thought that we would have avoided the need to go to appeal. So I think at this point, that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Peter. Really fascinating and so beautifully forensic description of what clearly is a very complex process, and one that I think, it's interesting, isn't it, that the sort of the editing and digesting of all of that material and distilling of it into such clear points sort of erases in a way, but you communicate it very nicely through your narrative. The what I can only imagine, sorry, and there's a bit of funny stuff going on with my screen, so hopefully you can just hear my voice. It starts to conjure the kind of heat that there must have been around a lot of those moments in the design process, when engaging with so many different parties and across so many different meetings also, and even those not being enough, because it will never be enough.
No.
And I guess before I go to some of the questions, and I think we've got some quite detailed questions about that process. I just wonder where do you sort of feel there is a kind of line that you can draw? I mean, clearly the process is, as the role of the architect, you are determining some of that timeline, but there's with so many bodies involved, you're also fitting into a structure. The 3 years, did the 3 years feel like a long time or not long enough?
Yeah, the 3 years felt very long, and there was a lot of back and forth, and I think because of the public resistance to the scheme, I think that's why we had so many pre-apps. The local authority themselves had to. It took them a bit of time to really stand behind their policies and not sort of falter to public pressure. I don't think it needed that long, but being such a complex project that a lot of the time was just for people to come round to the idea that actually policy is supporting this site to change transformatively.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. I mean, I have one question from one of our members of our audience who may well be quite close to the project, is my sense from the question, but it's a fairly bullish one. So let's take it. You've been through all these meetings, so I suspect you can handle pretty well anything. But it really points to an aspect of the consultation. I'll read the question. Your pre-consultation with local residents was minimal, despite the project being very prominent on top of a hill, and you were pushed into meeting local residents to discuss, but took no account of concerns raised. How would you address consultation in the future? So I guess the first part of that question is, going to raises a particular point of view. Yeah. Maybe to point to the second part of the question, how would you address consultation in the future if as I'm very sure we will all agree, will always fall short to some extent.
Yeah. I think from a BPTW point of view, the level of consultation we encounter on projects vary. So there is you have to as a minimum hold one consultation event, and that is a public consultation event. We would always advise a follow-up consultation event, but that is at the client's discretion. I think the more larger larger urban regen schemes that we work on, we would have, say, 10 to 15 public consultation events and workshops too. this one, and I appreciate that question and lead into the fact that there was just one public consultation event that was always going to be a risk on the client side, but as you can see, there was quite a long timeline of other parties to consult. Now, the main feedback from the consultation was the height, and it was that in principle a scheme of this height which materially transformed the area, the local residents were just not supportive of. But the planning policy, both at local level and mayoral level, they were pushing it. That they were pushing high density on the site and height. So that's just something we had to balance. There were some other softer points that came up in terms of the needs for, say, a cafe space, and all those softer points which we could take on board and have a conversation about, but the scale and the quantum on the site, you will always have to deal with difficult conversations in this line of work, and this on this particular site, that was one of them.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think there's another a question, in fact, from Southgate District Civic Voice, who said thank you very much for an interesting presentation. The question is, did you consider a community workshop or charrette to fully understand residents' views before designing? If so, what happened to the idea? And if not, why not?
So I do know that Southgate Civic Voice did undertake one by themselves, which they presented at appeal, and in terms of a charrette, the first event was a public consultation event where we proposed this scheme to then gauge input, and then at that point, I think comments or alternative suggestions could have been put forward. I think if it felt there was a need for a charrette, I completely agree that the client could have done that, but in this case, that's not something that happened.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, no, well, it's good to know. I mean, I'd love to know a bit more about how those consultations in a way happen, the kind of orchestration and the choreography of them, because the kinds of materials that you bring to speak about a project, I think, are so particular, aren't they? I mean, models and drawings and building up a language that everybody, architects and non-architects, can really share and appreciate. I wonder how much thought goes into that bit of process from
Well, now the nature of public consultation is changing, because the traditional model is you hire out a venue, post out leaflets, and then invite invite local residents to attend at a fixed period of time, whereas now there's a lot more you can build websites to gauge input. But I do think that one-to-one, having the ability to speak to a person that's quite closely involved in a scheme, to have a conversation, and it shouldn't be just a you provide me questions, I will give you an answer. It's more about having a conversation, and often I've been in consultations where I completely agree with residents' viewpoints, but there are so many conflicting priorities that you need to balance, and it's about planning and weighing up what is important.
Yeah,
I think just finally, it's often I think it is important to say that the architect will only have so much say. Often, like we can push, we can definitely push, but we don't have complete control of the decision making. So I think as long as we can just continue to push the areas that we feel are important, that's a good good position to be.
Yeah. Now I have a few more questions, Peter. So they're quite meaty ones. So I will move on. There was a similarly from the Southgate District Civic Voice question to me on behalf of the LSA, which was, has the LSA considered inviting civic societies to talk to students about community engagement? Yes, we have. We have some of that activity going on currently in our design think tanks. We have a module for our 4th years or year 1 students, master's students, which engages very directly working with civic societies on quite specific sites and projects. So very, very happy to grow that network and talk more. But yes, it's a big priority for us to try to encourage students and certainly expose our students to all of the players around that table in exactly this sort of, for exactly these reasons. And a big part of any architect's training is to learn to sort of filter, how to filter voices, how to take and synthesize very different points of view, and work collaboratively ultimately, which again is a critical part of this discussion. So moving swiftly on, there are a range of different questions. I think I will go to one which talks about, let me read the question. Would you consider that in the same way as the LPA had witnesses not associated with the scheme, that similarly you as applicant could have appointed a similar external team? Can being too involved in the scheme skew your ability to be objective, particularly when the LPA team was giving their assessment afresh?
Well, the reason the LPA were given their reasons afresh was because of that disconnect between the planning team effectively recommending it for approval, but then the councillors at a higher level then but basically just overriding the local councillors the local officers and this decision, which is their right to do. They weigh up the impact on their residents, but then that then put them in a position where that was what they had to do. I think calling a completely independent team to explain such a complicated design process feels counterintuitive, and I think the best team to talk about what we have done and the merits of the scheme that we felt were worthy of putting forward would be those working on the project.
Well, thank you for explaining that. And I have a question from a student, part of which has said essentially, do you consider it, did your practice consider it an architect's responsibility to personally defend the scheme? And did you get an extra fee for doing so? I get to charge the same rate as a lawyer might.
Well, there was the barrister appointed to defend the schemes. So the way the team was set up, you had the barrister who effectively pitches the case, and then we were called as witnesses, and then we produced the supporting information. I think given the length of time that we had worked on the scheme, given the efforts we had gone to ensure that there was support from the scheme from all the various stakeholders, we felt that we had got that scheme to a position that we were willing to defend it. And I think from a policy point of view, it is what Enfield Council's policy and what the mayor's policy was supporting for that part of London. I mean, it's not easy to see a tall building appear in a new place, but there had been studies done at an urban scale level that had effectively supported that principle. So we were coming along to do the detailed design in line with those principles.
That's really helpful, because it sets that context, doesn't it? There's an awful lot of work that goes on, preliminary work prior to the actual architectural design and proposal stage that often gets forgotten. You know, it doesn't land out of nowhere. I am conscious of time. We've got literally 1 minute left, and I've got one more question here I think we could just do, but it might be a very quick response, Peter, just because I want to try and get everybody's questions in. But what was the main drive, and it's about the height again, what was the main drive for the density on the site and the height, which seems to be the main concern of the residents and led to the initial refusal? The influence of the local planning authority or the client? And/or how do you think the system should change?
Okay, so the main reason for the density was because of planning policy, the need for homes, and if you look at the targets and how much we build, we are nowhere near where we should be. So that's why we have policies for brownfield sites for such density. So that was I'm not going to say the client also didn't push it, but it was supported at policy level. And what was part two of that?
It was, and how do you think the system should change?
Well, I at this point in time, it's not easy for me to say, because I do think that local people should be given a voice all throughout the system, and I think also the councillors should have that ability to decide. I think the main change for me would be for councillors to be better informed, because I did feel on the committee there were some really vocal, and then there were others that just sort of voted based on what they had heard from the more vocal councillors. So having a very informed committee panel for me would be a good starting point.
Fantastic. That's amazing. We have probably only gone over by about a minute. I like to keep these things punctual. Thank you so much, Peter. What an amazing breadth and depth of description and immersing ourselves in a project. I hope all here are inspired to engage in those conversations with councillors, more councillors, and think about how to present and discuss work in a really rounded and fulsome way that impacts the city in extraordinary ways. I hope you will return to the LSA. I hope everybody, thank you everybody else who is here. Thank you very much for sticking with us. And I suspect your lunch hour is now over, so please enjoy your afternoon, and look forward to seeing you next week back here at the LSA for another talk. Look out for the notices. Have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for all of the questions.
Great. Cheerio.
Thank you.
Bye.